In order. Let's do a roll call.
Wondergen,
Here.
Vanek. Here. Steffes, Gardine. Here. Campbell. Here. Dahan.
Here.
Hybler.
Here. All right, please note as a courtesy to members of the audience and the Board of Education, please silence your cell phones. Public will only be able to speak during public comment if signed up. Do you have anything for the budget? All right, great. Normally we do the Pledge of Allegiance, but we'll save that for our normal standard meeting. Skip that for these folks. First item is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Support.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 2, future action item, the 2025-2026 proposed budgets for the general fund, food service fund, student activity fund, capital projects fund, sinking fund, the bond fund, and the debt fund.
Okay, and we'll turn things over to Heather, and she will review this for you.
Not sure why it's doing what it's doing, so. Any idea there, Justin, why it's not?
Kind of the off on you.
Yeah, it's on this screen, but not on mine, and then I turn it the other way.
Good timing. Good. Just getting started.
So that's what mine should look like, but there should be normal.
Here.
Yeah, just mark you present. I want to make sure that we're here.
Okay, so the purpose of this hearing is to conform with the unified budget process that we run through every year. As part of that, the most important thing that we'll go over is the levies of the three major funds and the recommendations for those to be passed in the next meeting following this. And so we'll go over each fund. And this is the most important slide of the presentation. So we are looking to levy 18 mills on non-homestead properties for the general fund, 5.05 mills on all properties for debt service, and 1.3502 mills on all properties for the sinking fund. And you'll note those levy expirations of December of 2026, and in the previous meeting we discussed bringing a resolution to you soon to put those back on the ballot in November for renewal. So we've talked a lot about Headley rollbacks, and the good news is this year in the general fund and the sinking fund, we did not experience a Headley rollback. So, so that is good news. And then again, we'll bring a resolution to you regarding sinking fund and operating at the next meeting. Just to give you a little history, it's been one of two numbers for pretty much my entire time here, so which goes back to 2010. So 3.2 mils, and then in November of 19, the community approved an increase to 5.05 mils, and that is where we will still reside for the 25-26 school year. This is just a snapshot of where we fall within Kent County rankings when it comes to debt. So we are the 4th lowest in the county. And then when you look at Ottawa County, we're the 3rd lowest. I do want to highlight Grand Haven a little bit because, that's hard. When that falls off, that will be tough to get back. So just kind of understanding the importance of that. And I think they are going back for something soon, but that is, and then obviously the opposite way, we don't want to be above the 7 because then you're in the borrowing potentially for school bond loan fund and that type of stuff. So Grandville has not, to my knowledge, been in the school bond loan fund. I know they haven't since probably Tim Raymer, like even before Tim Raymer, I don't think they've
Correct.
been, so. So what were the assumptions for the debt service fund? So we're looking at an increase of 6.5% in property tax values with revenues of 12.8 million and expenditures of 12.6 million for a surplus of 204,000, giving us an ending fund balance of $1,049,000. We did have the restructure of the 2015 bonds, and so you'll see in your packets, when you get to that last part of the presentation, you can see how those debt payments are allocated to principal and interest for the coming year. Sinking fund, same thing, the levy remains at the 1.3502. Again, 6.5% increase in taxable value and renewed through 12 of 26. Sinking fund provides about $602 per pupil and used for projects around the district, primarily facility upgrades. And so far, projects that you've approved for the next school year include Century Park boilers, a high school gym floor resurface, and then we will be looking to bring you a high school and admin elevators in the coming months. And then we always keep a little portion set aside for emergency, and then so we might be bringing you some paving as well. Revenues looking at 3.3 million with expenditures of 1.85. I know that looks light, but that has to do with bond projects finishing up, and then planning for the summer of 26, and what we'll be bringing you then. So an ending fund balance of 1.8 million. Capital projects funds, we issued in 2024 the third and final series of that fund. The projects left, we are wrapping up transportation and maintenance. That is projected to open in October of this year, with the Weller Bay opening for second semester, so in January of 26. And then we have a schedule for technology replacement and some other things, and I know we've brought you some of that already, but there'll be more in the coming years. So the revenues really just are based on interest earnings, and the expenditures, one of that 3 million, 1.5 is dedicated to tech, and the other 1.5 to the finishing that transportation building. So the purpose of this fund, you're always going to see typically a deficit unless you're issuing a series in a year, but so a 2.925 deficit with an ending fund balance of just under 2.35 million. Food service is a self-supporting program, and we do have excess fund balance requirements that we need to hit. So one of the projects that we'll be bringing you is some remodeling to our high school cafeteria that will come from the food service fund. So a lot of the freezer space, some of the HVAC unit vents, and then a little redesign of the serving line area as well. Revenues consist of continuation of the free meal program that has been in both budgets so far that have been released. Revenues will be around 4.5 million with expenditures of 4.8. Deficit of 219,000 and looking at an ending fund balance of just under $1 million. So in the food service fund, we do have specific requirements on what can be charged there or not. So it does have to be all food service related. For instance, even if we were to buy new cafeteria tables, we can only charge a portion of that to the food service fund because those tables may be used for different events, not during the school day. So there's formulas and stuff in place for that. And then we are looking at an indirect transfer from the food service fund to the general fund again of somewhere around $200,000. Student Activity Fund, this fund is basically fundraising activities for various groups within the district. So it's really an in and an out. It does tend to carry a balance. It just is dependent on the time of year of when those expenditures come. Usually in the spring, that balance is higher because we've collected for prom and all those things, and then those bills come due a little bit later. So not a whole lot that changes in this fund. Usually you see a small surplus, and then carries an ending fund balance of $767,000. A lot of those are specific to what has been fundraised. So, and then the general fund, which is what we'll spend the majority of our time on, the state aid budget in Lansing. They're still working on a budget to come to agreement. The assumptions in this presentation and what's in your packet are all based on the executive budget proposal. Estimated a $392 increase to the foundation allowance. So that would be up from $96.08 in the current school year to $10,000. We are estimating flat enrollment. So looking at probably down about 34 students and still utilizing that 90-10 blend at the state level. So fall count being the heaviest and most important in terms of count data. Taxable value increase, same 6.5%. There was no Headley override. And just as a reminder, the taxes that we claim for the general fund amount to $3,268 per pupil approximately. And that is how we maximize making sure we're getting that full $10,000 in state aid. Because if your taxable value increases, your discretionary payment and your state aid, your Prop A payment goes down. And it works vice versa. So when there are large tax tribunals in Grandville, think very large properties that maybe are looking to get a tax break, if that happens, the impact on the general fund is usually offset by the state. Now, timing-wise, it doesn't line up always, but that is how that formula works. So this budget also includes continuation of the mental health and security funding and a 4% increase to at-risk, CTE, and early lit categorical funding. It does eliminate some one-time revenues, approximately $2.1 million, and the portion of that $2.1 million is actually offset on the expenditure side in 25-26 with the lower retirement rate. So you'll remember the whole 3% issue, and that the healthcare side of the pension fund was fully funded, and how were they gonna give that money back to districts, right? So they gave us a categorical this year as revenue. Next year, what they're doing is they're actually lowering the retirement rate. So the revenue goes away, but the district will pay less on the retirement side of things. So there's that there from an offset perspective. Assumptions on the expenditure side, salaries and benefits. We are currently negotiating with all groups. We do have a TA with one, and I think we're close with another group. But we have been pretty purposeful in what we have made from an assumption standpoint for those wage scales, and making sure that we're including step increases. Our staffing levels have been adjusted through attrition. We have approximately 15.8 FTE to date, and that's mostly on the teaching and admin side of things, where we've been able to gain some savings from that. The MIPSers rate, again, I talk a little bit about it going down, and usually when you look at the 2.991, that was when the two funds were just MIP and basic, and now there's a lot of different categories for people to fall into, and MIP and basic are closed. Nobody can enter those areas. So when you look at it on an individual employee basis, Grandville's average on the retirement side is 27.95%, and that's what was used in this proposed budget as well. And then employer insurance cap, that's increasing 2.9% over the current year. Other items that we eliminated the bus purchase that you approved in November. And there were other expenditures aligned with some grant funds that are no longer available. So overall, you can see from 24-25 to 25-26, the reduction in the revenues, and a lot of that is the changes in those state aid funding piece. So 82.5 million in revenues, and on the expenditure side, and that expenditure side, remember, that does include the items that we're talking about at the negotiation table. Is 83.3 million for a deficit of 810,180. The final for 24-25, I'm projecting a $918,000 deficit. That did increase from the final amendment because there were 2 grants, if you remember, that we were able to only claim so much before they were eliminated. So, so we're looking at, for year-end 25-26, just under 6.3 million, and that is based on expenditures of 7.55%. And I did do the adjusted fund balance for you again, because like when we negotiate and stuff, we don't include any of that UAAL or the federal dollars, because that's all budget neutral, right? It's all money in, money out. So when you pull that out and you look at strictly the stuff that is not budget neutral, you're looking at an 8.34% fund balance. And then this is just a historical. I know back in, gosh, I think it was like around the 2012-2013 school year, and it's no longer on here because it's fallen off, but we were just below 5%, and that does present challenges, but even during that time, we didn't have to borrow from the state to make payroll. We did make some pretty strategic changes at that point, where we went from 26 pays, we went to 24, with payments being on the 8th and the 23rd, unless it fell on the Friday before that or a holiday. And that helped make sure that we had, at that time, enough money. We had our state aid payment to be able to make that second payroll payment. So I think, I know that Roger was here for that, and I feel like, yes, maybe we're going into a little bit of a tougher time, but I think we're doing a lot of hard work to keep us where we're at and being able to support students and programming. And that is all I have, so I open it up to questions.
If I can do a comment first.
Sure.
First of all, I just want to say Heather and Kayla have done an amazing job with the budget, and our team has done an amazing job getting us to this point. She mentioned attrition. For people who wouldn't understand what we're talking about with that, we have somebody retire. Instead of replacing that person, that position, we get creative in who can either pick that up, or can we shift people around and eliminate some things to make it happen. And we were able to do that, amazingly, to do it without any huge impact. Our people from the outside looking in really won't be able to see much difference of what we have, which again, I think is amazing when we consider where we were at before we went into this. But fortunately, with people retiring, we were able to do a lot of that to take care of this challenge that we had, major challenge going, in January, February, as we were looking at this. So I applaud our team for that. I applaud our principals. I applaud our staff for great, they had some great ideas too. Hey, instead of doing this, what if we did this? And that's what you need, is your people working together to make something like that happen. So feel very good. If you would have told me in January we'd be where we're at right now without significant cuts, I would have said I would have done a cartwheel then if I would have known we were end up where we're at. So we've ended up pretty well. Negotiations, as Heather had mentioned, while we can't go into details, we feel really good. We don't know where we're going to land, but we're in the ballpark of where we're going to land. So we're pretty confident in the numbers that Heather is presenting, that we're going to land somewhere in that area. So, yeah.
Roger, I remember there was concerns expressed by staff members regarding class size numbers in particular for our kindergartens and stuff. Have some of those concerns been assuaged by reports or that have been issued to the staff regarding how this is all
So I think
going
a
on?
couple things with that, kindergarten, I've been at this for 36 years, is always a wild card, because you can think your class sizes are great a week before school and you'll have 10 kids enrolled like that, and then you're going, oh my gosh, now what are we going to do? So we feel good about, we're trying to stay within our contractual numbers, stay below those contractual numbers. We're also being creative with our schools of choice kids, where we have so many students allotted for our schools of choice. We're not telling people which school they have if they're a schools of choice kid right now. We're waiting till later in the summer so that we can see where we have some areas where we can fill gaps, versus saying, okay, you're going to, because it's close by, you're going to Central, then find out all of a sudden Central has 29 kindergartners, which you're going to do something with, right? So we're being very strategic in that, just making sure we're able to fill where we have space and not overload a spot where we end up in a building.
I mean, looking in the crystal ball, do you foresee our fund balance going down again next year, or is this the lowest that you would see it going?
Wow. If I
Looking
knew
ahead
that, I don't know what's going to happen, at a federal level that will also impact the state level. So that combo, so I'm not sure. We know that 7% is where we have policy on that we won't go below that. So if that's the case, where we were going to go below that 7, we would have to look at everything we're doing, and we do that early on. I mean, December, early January, we're looking at that, and so we would have a pretty good handle on that component of it. But there's so many unknowns. The budgets are unknown, both at the state and the federal level, so those are hard. So I couldn't give you if I were a betting guy, I would say we're going to have to do probably something similar next year, as far as looking at our attrition numbers and maybe being creative with some things. I think we're in that time. You go through cycles. I think we're in a cycle where every year we're going to have to look at everything we're doing, evaluate everything we're doing, try to get creative with some things, and maybe use some opportunities to maybe not fill some things, such as we did with Hannah's job. So I think those types of things we'll have to continue to look at. And because we know that, I think we're already in that mindset with everything. I mean, everything from copies to, do you really need to copy Google Docs? Things like that. As a matter of fact, you'll hear me pretty soon talking about maybe we can go away from this for you guys if possible.
Yes.
For the last 4 years.
So there are some things, we're looking at a lot of those things, and I think we'll probably get some savings earlier in the year that'll obviously help us going into next year.
And part of that pre-planning, just in terms of our negotiations, we're working through trying to be a 2-year agreement with a wage reopener for year 2, so that we can get a better sense of here's where we feel comfortable in the moment. Going into next year, now we know more about what our revenue is and what our expenditures are. Is there a different way that we need to, from a wage standpoint, look at that for the following year? So to your point, we're trying to create some of those proactive ways to protect us going forward in terms of how much we think we can spend next year, because we're not sure what the budget's going to look like next year, because we're not at crystal ball. So just so you know that when we come back with at least the one TA, we have a wage reopener in that language to help us.
What's the headcount change? You talked about wages and we're, absorbing some of the people that are retiring. What's our overall headcount now versus what it's going to be?
In terms of staffing?
Yeah.
So
And which group is taking the biggest hit?
the teachers have taken the biggest hit.
Okay.
We reduced 15.8 FTE out of our teachers. We reduced 2 full FTE out of our administrative group. We're about 11 FTE. It's hard to identify that as a single person for our paraprofessionals because
Yeah.
as we're moving our way through, we're looking at different roles
Yeah.
and things like that, but we reduced that by 11 FTE.
Yeah.
And tried to hit the positions that also carry the insurance side of it that we had kind of added into in those moments.
Yeah.
So we've hit each, thus far, we've hit each of those areas to try to find ways to get to a place where going into a negotiation year that we can negotiate in good faith with our folks, try to give them some form of meaningful wage increase as we go our way through it, but also, like Roger said, not have the service that we're providing to our community, to our kids, be dramatically impacted or potentially even visibly seen from the outside.
So one of the questions, in full disclosure, I asked Roger before the meeting, but I want to hear your response too, is one of the biggest line items I saw in the general fund change was the capital outlay, right? We've been spending anywhere from $850 to $1 million a year, and all of a sudden now we're saying we're going to go to 160, right? So a $650,000 difference in capital investment, substantial. What, anything that's causing that, or?
Yeah, 450,000 of that is buses.
Is it buses?
We've
Okay.
also eliminated, and so we also have line items for vans and maintenance vehicles. Those have been eliminated as well. I mean, that's not something, and then Ryan's here to talk later about one of the proposals in the next meeting, but that's not something that is sustainable either.
Yeah.
We understand that, and we don't want to get into, there's a replacement cycle in place for a reason.
Right.
But, we've worked, and the mechanics are awesome, and we'll continue to work through that. But, that's the big chunk of it. There's probably some tech in there as well. But the other piece of it is like, this year, we opened Oakstown. We have a STEAM class there. We had to outfit that with some technology that would be in the cap out line item. So that was, when I look at that's another piece, right? The one-time costs to open that is probably around $200,000 that came from the general fund on just materials and curriculum type stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And you can see with the sinking fund, if we pass that sinking fund, now buses are
Buses are
part of
included
that.
that,
So
yeah.
that's going to offset some of that general fund piece.
You said there were 2 grants that had to, once we got a little bit out of it and then they were canceled. What were those 2 grants for?
So the one, it was part of an ESSER grant, and it was for high school credit recovery.
Okay.
For a summer program. We actually were paid for that in 23-24 school year, but that came through, and I don't know yet if the feds have taken that back from the state and if the state is going to in turn take that back. I think in the Senate's proposal that came out, they had a line item in there to help offset that. For us, it was like $26,000, but there were other districts that were doing construction projects that were already approved for larger amounts. So I put that in there because I want to be conservative, because if they take it back, I need to account for it. The other one was a health resource advocate grant, and that one was covering, like 85% of one of our nurses, and that around spring break is when the final draw on that was able to be had, so, or reimbursed. So that one's done. And then there's another one, it's called the Hill Grant, which helps mentors young principals, and that one has also been eliminated at the federal level.
I'm going to save my questions for the regular meeting.
Okay.
So we can end on time.
Okay.
It's
31,
actually 7 o'clock.
31 AA grants, have those been tapped into, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, so in the current school year and then rolling forward in the next school year too, yep.
Just real quick, I guess, is there any line item on there that you feel has the opportunity to flex the most that we should be concerned about? And maybe attached to that, what's the one that you're most worried about when you look at this budget? What's keeping you up at night?
I don't know, that's just one line item.
And if it's not, that's all right, but it,
You know, I think, I mean, would I like to not be in this position? Yeah.
yeah.
But at the same time, we've done a lot of the work, so I'm pretty confident in that piece. I guess the one line item would be the state revenue side of things, and
Yeah.
then potentially whatever happens at the federal level with Medicaid, those would be, and those aren't like, right, those, we can't make more widgets in our
Right.
company.
Right.
So it's the revenue side that is what makes me nervous.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
All right, any other questions?
Thanks, Heather.
Welcome.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
appreciate it.
All right, since no public comment, the next workshop meeting will occur after the budget hearing adjourns on June 2nd, 2025. And we'll start no sooner than 7 PM. We are adjourned for the budget meeting.